Welcome, everybody. It's the second day of the 2020 annual meeting. I'm Ed Gardner, but I'm not going to be speaking today. This morning, we've got a panel on how to lobby with some veterans from a couple of chapters across the country that have actually managed to get up in the faces of politicians and maybe convince them of things. So if a couple of house cleaning things, I'm going to drop this live feed into the Discord channel, so folks who aren't on Zoom can see it. I'll be helping monitor both Discord and chat here. I'll probably tag a couple people like HK and the like to help moderate things as well, so that when you guys are ready for questions, you'll turn it over. You'll say, "Okay, we're ready for questions," and then we'll help pick and choose those questions. So there will be chat on Zoom. There'll be chat on Discord. This is live now, obviously, on Zoom, and I'm going to go paste the link to the YouTube feed, which is unlisted, so we're not completely public today. The unlisted feed so that folks can watch it if they don't know how to do Zoom. So, Lara, it is your show.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. This panel is actually LGC members who have either lobbied or at least gone in front of state legislatures to talk about gun issues. Some of us have appeared at committee meetings. Some of us have gone door to door. Some of us have done both. I've done state and federal. With me, we have Richard, who is our Oregon rep, who might be one of the ones who was the earliest, and he's a registered lobbyist. And do we have another? David, are you or Deb registered? Deb's not.
No, we don't. In Virginia, we had no requirement to do so.
Right. Yeah. And we don't either in California. And well, in California, it depends on how many hours a year you do, and we weren't anywhere close to getting there. And then David and Deb are the two of our Virginia reps that had a really successful experience going. So we decided we were not going to the VCL Lobby Day, that it was going to be probably not what best represented our club and our values. But we decided to go in 3 days later, 2 days later.
So the VCDL Lobby Day is the 20th of January. Which is a Monday, Martin Luther King Day. We did, which is traditionally when every organization, citizen lobbyists, they show up, they annoy the legislators. We waited until that Friday, and we had a whole stack of meetings set up. It actually went really well.
Yeah. So so we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to I'll probably have Richard lead us off, since he was kind of the earliest, and then have Deb and David tell us about their Virginia experience. And then I'll talk about what California and DC look like. And then we'll kind of open it up for questions. So Richard, why don't you tell everybody about your experiences?
Okay. Well, here in Oregon, last year we had a slew of gun control bills that just all came up at once, and everything from an assault weapons ban, magazine bans, safe storage, which we didn't have much of a problem with, concealed carry restrictions for the first time, and some other things. And so it was like an all fronts kind of deal. So I organized in total, we did 8 trips down to Salem. Salem is our state capital. It's about 90 minutes away. And I did about half of those trips on my own and half with other members of the clubs who could come, because often it was in the middle of the week. So our first person that we saw was someone that we intentionally chose because we knew that she was a pro-Second Amendment Democrat. She's actually, her name is Bessie Johnson, and she's part of the small but lively Blue Dog Democrat caucus here in Oregon. So, but she was extremely helpful and very friendly. And she actually took out a list of all the legislators. It's a pre-printed list that's available at the state capitol of all the representatives and senators, one on each side. And she went through each and every one of them and told us which ones were worth seeing, which ones weren't worth our time, and which ones are probably against us, but you should probably see them anyway. And so that's what we did. And that was a good move, I think. She it pointed us in the right direction, kind of gave us a little experience with the friendly audience, and then we could go on to the less friendly people. So that worked out quite well. And in total, let me see, we several members of the club. I think Betsy, it was one member. Two other people came with me to see Betsy. She was one was a member of the LGC who also heads up the Pink Pistols chapter here in Oregon, and the other one was our vice president at the time, Marissa. And we can get into the dynamics later, but Marissa and Betsy really hit it off. So that's a good. That's when you know to step back and just let the two people, because the person that the representative or senator has chemistry with isn't always going to be you. So step back and let the other people hit it off and establish that rapport. And that's a good way to go. That's why groups are, if you can handle it, are better.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, good. David and Deb, you guys want to talk about Virginia?
Absolutely. So in Virginia, the state house, the governor has been a Democrat for a long time. It's been a succession of Democrats, and the state house flipped in the last election. And after 25 years of Republican control, the Democrats had both the upper and lower house, which is good, except that they did it with a lot of out-of-state money from people who don't like guns, which is not so good. The VCDL, which is the 800-pound gorilla of gun policy in Virginia, we have our differences with them, but historically they've been very effective as long as the legislature was Republican dominated. They had their rally. It made the news. It was not good. We'll get into that a little later. We deliberately avoided it. Thankfully, that rally didn't go horribly wrong with arrests and deaths and whatnot, but it was not good for us. So that Friday we went down. We had a stack of people who we were meeting. We started by meeting Lee Carter, who represents a working class part of Manassas. For those of you who don't know Virginia, that's really about where Northern Virginia ends, or it used to be for a few years ago. He's a socialist. And he was very welcoming. He was the first one we met with. He was not able to give us that sort of human intelligence, but it was a very positive meeting. Then we broke off. Some of us, I think, were at a committee hearing, and then others went to our appointments. And whenever we weren't in appointments, we just tried getting meetings with whoever, chief of staff. And that's really what it was. Wear comfortable shoes. You know, it's suit, and you know there are better and worse dress shoes to wear, and wear the better ones. Have a printed list of everywhere that you need to be and at what time. You may want to program it into your phone so that it's just a calendar reminder so that you can get there. And really, we would start off each one of our meetings, and Deb, you were really good at this, is we would say, we're not BCDO, we're not NRA, we are LGC, we're NAGA. National African American Gun Owners Association was helpful because they had their own perspective, and they were able to open doors that we couldn't, and make friends that we couldn't.
So there were, as David mentioned earlier, we came right about 4 days after the big lobby day where everyone sort of showed up in their, a whole bunch of people showed up in their sort of hunting gear, tactical gear, and guns slung over their shoulders, pretty universally white. They weren't all white, pretty universally male, but they weren't all male. And we walked in on that Friday with appointments, respectful. And I have to give a shout out to Brian Robinson, who I see has pulled into this he joined us from the NAGA chapter, and sort of along those same lines of what Richard said, we found the multi-group approach to be very effective. The other thing that was very effective is that we were dressed in street clothes as opposed to in tactical. We were not carrying, I mean, I had a dog with me, but that was the only the only sort of out of the ordinary thing. And we didn't walk in with, you know, as we talked about earlier in the week as we were prepping for this, the pounding on the desk attitude. So I got involved much later, and I have to give a huge shout out to David and Brian and a couple of other folks who were a huge part of the prep for this. And if I could say anything about the success of lobbying in Virginia, and the thing that we need to keep doing is to do our homework, to do our prep work, to make an appointment, to show up on time, to show up in a very open way, and show up in a way that shows the diversity of gun ownership in this country. And make sure that you've got folks like, and I'm going to call out again, because you're going to hear a lot from David and I, but Brian was so articulate on the issues of how the gun control policies that they were implementing or wanted to implement affected more marginalized, traditionally marginalized populations in our country and in our community. And the other thing that we all had is we all had our own personal, very powerful stories to bring to why we became gun owners. And that personalizes it for not just for the people who are hearing the story, and to understand that this is not something where your gun culture is not I grew up hunting at my dad's knee. It is, for many of us, a journey that is far more intricate, and many of their bills present barriers to the exercise of many of our other rights. And so I see Brian is turned on the camera, but I don't have anything else really to add on that. But it was, have your homework done and have all kinds of folks in your group who have their different strengths that they bring to the table, and bring it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Brian, you want to introduce yourself and talk about how you got to the lobbying? Because you didn't come with LGC, you came with NAAGA.
Well, hang on, let me make sure. Yep, I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Robinson. I am a LGC member, obviously, but I'm also a member of the National African American Gun Association. I'm sure Dave already gave you the background of how we got to this. But yeah, I came in essentially dual-hatted, but I ended up talking more of the NAGA angle than the LGC angle, since we had plenty of folks there who could handle that. But yeah, it was useful being there in that several of the representatives or their staffs were African American, and like a lot of us who grew up, and besides us, I didn't grow up around guns. I grew up in Chicago, where aside from the 38 in grandma's nightstand that no one was supposed to know about, guns were for cops and criminals. The events of the 2016 election, that was kind of my mindset. I was never anti-gun, but it was just not, that's not for me. So we won't get into all that, but suffice to say that I could personally relate to a lot of the staff and the members there who kind of still had that mindset. And talk to them about, remember, just think about how California became such a strident gun control state, and Black Panthers, and once they did their thing, Ronald Reagan and his Republicans couldn't enact gun control fast enough, and just other things like that how it directly affects the African American community. And how you could be a safe and responsible gun owner. Just being able to bring my personal perspective to it, I think helped a lot of people. And also remind me, hey, we have a gun organization here for African Americans that's based right here in the Richmond area, and we meet at the range twice a month when they're open. And you're welcome to come out and join us if you like. So again, just being able to talk to that particular perspective, I think helped out a lot.
And to sort of build on what Brian was saying about representing different groups, I was one of the Virginia organizers for the Women's March on Washington. So when I walked in, they knew that I had been part of the group that was the powerhouse behind Democrats taking the legislature in Virginia.
Yeah, I think that all of that is really good points. It's really helpful to go in with something other than we're not the NRA, although that is incredibly helpful. So I've gone both to DC and to California. In California, I go on behalf of LGC. In DC, I was going as part of DC Project, although I've since left it. When it started, it was nonpartisan, and it's not now. So but when we went to DC, that was really interesting. And I'll echo exactly what David said about having appointments. We spent months setting up our appointments with our representatives. And for me, being part of LGC, it was a lot easier because I could say, even if I wasn't a constituent to a particular California rep, I could say, I represent a group that has one of your constituents because we have so many members in California. So that's one of the things having the club behind you can do. You can say, look, we represent more than just this zip code. We represent everywhere. So I also agree with comfortable shoes are important. You're going to walk a lot. But, right now, there's still things you can do. In California, one of the cool things that we got to do was when I actually got invited by a rep who's not mine to come testify about a bill that she had sponsored to the committee. And that ended up making a difference. You don't necessarily have to go just have one-on-one meetings, although those are very helpful. You can go, public can go do comments on bills. And a lot of people don't realize that. And depending on your state, when that comment period is different. In some states, it's at committee. In some states, it's literally kind of when they're being argued, although that's more rare at smaller states that have that. But you can watch the bills. You can set up a feed that tells you when when gun bills are coming up. And you can go on the day, you can call. And the best way to do this is find out who wrote the bill and call their office and say, hey, I'd like to come to the public comment. And they'll tell you when it is. So even if you're not going for a particular appointment, you can go to that and you can list your name and say, I oppose because. And so I've done that before, but I've also gone and actually been one of the people invited to testify to the committee. And one of the things I talked about was representing the non-traditional gun owner and how this particular law had to do with our may issue, shall issue issues in California about our permits. We have a may issue state where the sheriffs can decide basically to disenfranchise people from the Second Amendment. And this law was trying to create a standard for the sheriffs about what that was going to be. It was still going to be may issue, but there had to be a standard that was uniform. And when I testified, one of the things that I talked about was how people were being disenfranchised and who it was. And because I was from LGC, I was a new face. I was dressed very professionally. I was a woman. I was very not threatening. I was not the typical face, but I was also very, very different from Shannon Watts, who was actually at this personally, which I thought was interesting. And so one of the things that I recommend is watch what both sides, people on both sides are doing it. And one of the real skills that LGC has is that we are not either of the big two groups. The big two groups are the NRA and the NSSF in DC for certain things, but really the NRA in DC and then the NRA state chapters in the different states, which I think VDCL is part of that.
No, VCDL is independent.
Okay.
I think they grew out of Gun Owners of America.
Got it. Okay. Well, that explains a lot. So we kind of have like state level groups for that, and then there are national and state level groups that are genuinely, they are true believers, and they show up in mass a lot, with a lot of women wearing matching T-shirts with NPR tote bags. But they don't do as many meetings as you would expect. They come to all the committee stuff. And so that's one of the really interesting things is one of the things, and Deb, you talked about this a little bit when we were prepping, and I think maybe Brian and Richard also have talked about this. On the anti side, you get a lot of emotion and how can you want dead children? When the real problem is how can you want dead white children? And on the pro side, David is the one who has the best story about this, about how they've talked, how for all of us, I think we've been in the room where a legislator has said, you guys are so different than most of the gun people who come in here. Mm-hmm. You're so much more polite. You're so much easier to talk to. I can't believe that you're not yelling at me. And I've had that experience both at the state and the federal level. And for those of you kind of knew the club, a lot of people know this story, but when I went to DC the first time, Barbara Boxer was still in, it was not Harris yet, for our senator. And I had not bothered to call Dianne Feinstein's office. I was like, they are not going to want to talk to me. Kind of pick your battles. I have limited time. I can't get everybody. We're not going to do her. We're going to go to Boxer. Well, I got the appointment with Boxer's office. And about 3 days later, my phone rang with a DC number. And I said, oh, it's somebody calling me back for one of the appointments I asked for. And it was Dianne Feinstein's staff calling to specifically invite us to come. We heard you were going to be here. Would you please come talk to us? Which was amazing. So we actually went, and that was a really productive meeting. So, and part of it was because when I called Boxer staff, I was really nice and said, I'm really interested. I'm a constituent, but I'd really like to talk to you about this. But I want to see if we can't be some sort of resource. And that's one of the other things we can talk about. David, can you tell the story about what happened with the one legislator?
Yes, I have two stories. So we had our second lobby day, which was toward the end of the session. And we got 15 minutes with Chap Peterson. Now here's a little backstory. We also, one of our members in Virginia is dual carded with SRA. And he's in about the same space that I am personally and professionally. And he brought another member who's in a similar space personally and professionally. And Chap Peterson, three of us, all of us were his constituents. And we got 15 minutes with him. And he was tired. And I'm paraphrasing here, so Champ, if you hear this, these are not your words. This is the sense which I got from them. Okay, now that disclaimer is out of the way, he said that the gun rights organizations like to pound the table and scream at him. The gun control organizations like to emotionally blackmail him. And he was really happy that we wanted to have a real conversation with him. And he basically said that they had passed everything that they were going to pass and that he was pretty much interested in killing the rest of it because he was tired of dealing with it. Not his words, mine. He also, we met with him subsequently. Yes, we have our differences, but he is somebody that we can work with. He's a gun owner. He's a little bit of a FUD, but that's okay. And then last week we met with, let me just get his name, with Sam Rasool. Similar position, similar ideology. And he sent me his personal cell number afterwards, and he said, I'd love to hear from you. And I sent him a nice little note. Now that with the Supreme Court decision on Friday, I've got to figure out how I'm going to send that to him. I'm sorry, Ninth Circuit Court Appeals. I'm sorry, I'm a little tired. And see if I can, because again, I'm not trying to road on Damascus convert the guy. I'm trying to just help him get a little bit more information. In prepping for the lobby day, one of the things that was incredibly helpful was Guns Guide to Liberals. If you want to be active in the space, they were on last night. They're also going to be on YouTube. Watch that. Listen to their podcast. They're going to have another season of it. I can't wait for it. And some of those are extremely effective techniques. You have to figure out what works for you. Mm-hmm. We also be aware that initially you're going to get your head bitten off by politicians where you don't know how strongly anti they are. This Senate Majority Leader, whose name escapes me, Deborah, I'm never going to forget how he was mansplaining gun control to you.
Briefly, it was brief. We fixed that quickly.
Do you want to tell it?
There's not really a lot to tell. I think, so David and I went in together. I can't remember if anybody else was in with us.
There was previously, and I feel terrible about it, one of the people who was there, who was actually an SRAer, was his guy, and he talked with him. It was, of course, a disaster. I didn't know what this was. Lesson learned.
To be fair, so we had tried to get appointment with the Senate Majority Leader for our Senate here in Virginia, and for whatever reason hadn't. And so we thought, well, we'd walk around. I had the dog with me. So I have a white German Shepherd Siberian Husky mix who is my service animal. And so he's with me everywhere I go. And he catches a bit of attention because he's a white German Shepherd Husky mix, and he's kind of pretty. And so that caught people's enough attention. It gathered some crowds. So the Senate Majority Leader, whom we'd not been able to get time with, invited us into his office to talk to him. So in all fairness, he didn't have to do that, but he did. But when he realized we were there to talk about gun rights, it irritated the heck out of him. He is one of those people who believes I was in the military and assault weapons should not be in the hands of the citizens. And so David very politely tried to explain to him the position of the Liberal Gun Club on rights being universal and access to the Second Amendment, and he was just ticked. And so I started to talk to him, and he was mansplaining guns to me. Now, I don't disclose widely the fact that I own a number of the guns that he does not believe should be in the hands of citizens. But it seemed immediately like he was the kind of person where he's from Virginia, that the Southern technique of finding something to converse about might work better. And so the trick that we used on him was to convert him from an adversary to feeling a little bit bad about how he was treating this very nice woman who had things in common with him, like family in Hawaii and military family and service to country. And so it took a couple minutes, but by the time we finished it, he had at least heard our story.
I was letting you do the work because you're way more effective in this than I am. And I also knew that he was going to run out of steam eventually.
And Richard, you had an experience too, and Brian, I think maybe you did as well, where there were legislators who were not initially super warm to you guys, but it actually turned out to be pretty positive. Do you guys want to address those?
Yeah, I think just to preface echoing what was already said here, demeanor and attitude goes a long way, and just the name of the club actually opens doors.
Yeah.
I only had one representative refuse to see me, but as soon as I said a liberal gun club, doors open. So rely on that and use that. There was some Oh, and I'd also like to say that there were one time we went down. We usually met with multiple representatives on each trip, but at one time there was a protest going on outside. You know, they were gunned up. They had their body armor on, the whole bit outside. And we walk in. We had an appointment, and the contrast was useful. So that's echoing what you said. Yeah, and I think that relief at seeing us rather than them,
Right.
that helped get the rapport going more. So I'd just like to say that slew of bills in Oregon, they all failed. I'd like to think that was partly due to us. There were others lobbying as well. But ultimately, I have to say that politics, the political landscape is going to be the driver of what's going on. What happened here in Oregon is that finally the Democratic leadership, maybe because we were making lots of noise along with a lot of other people, the Democratic leadership finally said to the people who were sponsoring the bills, we don't want to do gun control before the election. That's going to throw the election for us. So the leader, you do what you want to do. You have that right, and sponsor your bills, but you're not going to get any support from the leadership. And that's what happens. And every one of them died. So just remember that what we do is hugely important, and it has an impact, but ultimately it's the political calculations that's going to do or die.
I would absolutely agree. In Virginia, there were a couple of things going on. One of the people who ran and won last cycle was a creature of Bloomberg, and I don't remember the guy's name. Who we didn't even bother meeting with the guy. And apparently, when I talked with Sam Rasool, with Representative Rasool, he said that he was relying on this guy for a lot of the information. And I was getting the sense from him that we have the opportunity to replace this guy. Again, or at least provide another voice. Also, the House Majority Leader, we got to talk with her chief of staff one afternoon. I was exhausted, and she had a Moms Demand Action poster in her office. So that's what we were dealing with. Our goal there, I do want to meet with her again. There are a couple other people who I really want to set up meetings with. My goal with a lot of them isn't to change minds so much as it is to give them a little bit more information and then let nature take its course.
Yeah,
because
I think that's a really, really good point, that a lot of what I've heard over and over and again, and Brian, I don't know what the other organization's position on this is, but when I've gone in, we have always said, hey, we just want to let you know that liberals own guns. I'm a gun owner. I'm your constituent, and I'm not what you see on either side of this most of the time. But if you have technical questions, please feel free to call me so you don't have to call the NRA. And that's been a huge thing. And frankly, that has been effective with both Republicans and Democrats, because the Republicans often personally aren't gun people. So they don't know. They're voting on this on party lines, but when they don't know how to counter the emotional attack because they don't know the facts, because all they get are the NRA, my rights, Second Amendment shall not be infringed. So they kind of don't get the good data from that end. And they don't get, and they know they're getting bad data from the other side. So it's very valuable on both sides. And Brian, how does NAAGA deal with, do you guys come in as a resource as well? Is that part of is that part of that organization's process?
Well, first off, NAGA is we're a little bit behind LGC in our influence efforts. That was actually supposed to be a topic of the convention that got coroned that was supposed to happen this month. But yes, the national organization is now starting to understand that, hey, we need to be part of this discussion. We just can't be about arming and training people. But I would echo everything that Richard and Dave and yourself, Lara, have said about, one, being that friendly face. It's like going, oh, thank God you're not the NRA or BCDL. Well, David actually has mentioned the story about the death threat that was phoned in to one of the legislators while we were actually there. And I'll let David tell that story. But yeah, just seeing that liberal gun club or National African American Gun Association, that's a huge sigh of relief. The fact that we're not yelling at them while we're there and talking, beating our chest, talking about my rights. You know what? I have a background similar to you. I grew up in the city in an urban environment. So I know where you're coming from because I am you. Here's something that perhaps you didn't know. And here's some information. Here's how some of these bills, while I understand your intent, here is how this could be abused, how maybe this isn't the best approach. And let's talk about something called root cause mitigation, which is something that it just kind of blows their mind that, you know what, you don't have to go on a gun confiscation parade in order to get at some of these causes that frankly have been affecting our communities for generations. So just coming in with that approach has just made so much of a difference. I mean, when we saw our representatives and their staffs a few days after the BCDL rally, they were afraid. That's FRAYED. Just days before, they had seen, I don't know what the final count was, but let's say thousands of mostly white conservative men in firearms and body armor around their workspace, and it kind of shook them. And in a lot of cases, it didn't sway them; it actually just hardened their opinions of gun owner. So us coming in nice business wear with our paper, with our homework done, and just speaking to them, not yelling at them and shaking our fists at them, that made, I think, a tremendous amount of difference.
Makes a tremendous impact too. Just the way you went in, and sounds you went in big too. You made a splash. Here in Oregon, I heard back that from a well-known member who has I believe it's his brother-in-law who works as an aide in the state capitol, said that he got back to us that said that after we made they were talking about us. You know, first they realized we exist, and then, you know, because all of these politicians and all their aides, they talk amongst each other, so word gets around. So that was our introduction, and it's the same for you. And that gives us a certain, next time we come in, we can use that.
Yes.
So one of the challenges that we face here in Virginia is that we have a governor who ran heavily on gun control. And the thing that may have helped us, he was determined that these things were going to go through. And the Democratic Party, again, as earlier mentioned, heavily funded by anti-gun ownership groups. They have, there is this sort of conspiracy of you will be like us in order for us, you will hold this platform. And gun control and quite frankly, anti-gun ownership is a strong plank in the platform of the Democratic Party here in Virginia. And it is a strong fundamental component of Ralph Northam's platform. But here is the thing, this is a long game, not a short game.
Right.
Our governor can only be the governor once. He cannot run a second time. We got the gift of the COVID, because while the things were on the slate, what the Democrats did is they managed to get we were not as effective as Richard in stopping all of the bills, although we got some of the most heinous ones stopped. But what we have now is a platform to say that while we were as a state dealing with the impact of a pandemic, this is what the Democrats were actually focusing on, not the health of the state, but on gun control. And so we have this chance to formulate a much stronger message and a much more cohesive message that talks about the other big topic in the state and in this country, and that is police funding. Because every single law being proposed within Virginia requires more police effort. And everything that we recommended instead of those gun control laws actually feeds the defund the police message. Now, I'm not saying we're a defund the police group. What I'm saying is we strongly advocate for better investment in community programs that mitigate the violence that guns are often used to perpetrate. And Brian and David, and I think we came in with a very strong message that said, if you implement these gun control laws, here will be the negative impact on the community. If you move the money that you would have to use to implement gun control over to these community programs, studies have shown that the violence will decrease. And now we have Black Lives Matter as a movement articulating those same things. And so I believe the Democrats are going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. And in Virginia, it is a party-based belief system. Republicans versus Democrats. It's not, I mean, there is this strong push to very black and white nature of yin and yang of it. Is on Brian and David and, I mean, similar experiences? Is that how you would take it?
I would say it a little bit differently. It's a mutual hate relationship based on misunderstanding and differences in cultural values. The Democratic Party in Virginia, and I've lived in the DC area all of my life. I haven't spent a huge amount of time living in Virginia, but most of my career I've been across the bridge from Maryland. And for those of you who have spent more time here, let me know where I go wrong. But Virginia is in a period of transition. It's Richmond, Norfolk, Newport News, and Northern Virginia versus kind of the rest of the state.
Yeah.
And Northern Virginia is kind of like New Jersey stapled on to a southern state. As a result, there's a bit of resentment and there's a lot of misunderstanding.
And I think that's true in a lot of states. Oregon definitely has Portland versus everyone else. California has the coast versus everyone else. Washington has Seattle and Western Washington versus everyone else for the West Coast. Nevada is Las Vegas versus everyone else. So you'll find that in a lot of your states that there's a cultural divide between where the majority of your Democratic reps are coming from and where the majority of your Republican reps are coming from. And so, and there's physical differences, there's real, true cultural divide, not kind of culture war divide, but rural, urban, in big states like California, with the economic engines are incredibly different for the coast versus the valley. And then getting up into like the mountains and that kind of thing. I mean, you know, the border in California is really different at the South and the North, what the real problems, what the real everyday problems people have in their lives and what they're asking their state and federal level legislators to address are really, really different things, not just culture war. So that is something really to know when you're going to talk to people in a lot of states. You know, some on the East Coast are more homogenous than here, but not a lot. You know, Florida definitely has the 3 South Florida counties versus everyone else. Issues. So, you know, you think about that if you're going in and where you are and what perspective you're bringing in to people you're talking about, because a lot of times they really have only seen a lobbyist who's from this other economic, cultural, other issues part of the state. And so it's really interesting when you go in to be that person. Also talking about COVID is one of the things I wanted to talk about quickly, and I want to have time to get to questions. There are things we can do now because this is how to lobby. if you want to lobby, if something's coming up in your state, reach out to me and to the leadership of LGC. I think everybody knows kind of the national level people, me, Ed, Eric, and John. Reach out to me, Ed or Eric, if you see something in your state that you say, hey, I want to go address, we have this awful law coming in, or we have a law that, you know, I don't hate it, but it could be better. That's a really valuable thing too.
May I jump in very quickly? Before you have the bad law, before it's even on the docket, before it's written, you should be getting organized, meeting your reps, building that rapport.
Yeah, but I agree with that. But if somebody has something in particular they want addressed, bring that to us, because we may have actually already addressed one of those laws in what this group has done, who's lobbied, and or even another member. Bring that to us. If you just want to go lobby and you just want to meet your members, that's a slightly different process. And I agree with David. That's absolutely valuable, and we should all be doing that. Slightly different thing. If there's a law that if there's a particular thing that you want to address, there's a committee meeting that you want to go to, let us know and we will get you the resources. If you're really interested just in general lobbying on behalf of the club, also let us know that. Different process. To be a lobbyist, it depends on your state laws as to going to the state legislature. DC also has particular laws for going to the House. You can, as a non-lobbyist in DC, it's actually called being an advocate. You can go in and talk about a topic, but not advocate for or against particular bills as your agenda. Now, they can come up in the conversation, but if we're going to go address a particular bill, we have to have registered lobbyists, and that is a process. And since we are, for those of you who don't know, we are a corporation, we're a 501c4, specifically so we can be part of that process instead of a C3. So we can do that. We can get you guys set up. During COVID, what can we do? Call your reps. Ask for a phone call. Send postcards. LGC has postcards. They're the big, bright rainbow postcards. I have stacks of them. John has stacks of them. We will send them to you. We are happy to have everybody send postcards saying, hey, I'm a member of LGC. I'd love a chance to talk to you. You can send that to them. You can also call. Email is by far the easiest way to get a response from a rep's office. The phone calls are generally, if there's a big something happening in your legislature or at DC, the phone lines are going to be full, and they're literally only listening for whatever that issue is, and they're tacking pro con, and they're not, you're going to get missed in that. If you send an email, you can send an email that's very nice and polite. I have wording that says, you know, I am a member of LGC. I'd love to get to talk to you about this particular issue about root cause mitigation. And those are great. Literally a 5-minute phone call introducing yourself is incredibly, incredibly valuable. Start with your particular rep. And your DC rep, your House rep, is a fabulous person to get to know. You won't actually get through to them. You'll get through to their staff person who does Second Amendment issues. That's actually the person you want in DC. Those are the people in DC who matter. For where DC Project had more effect, it was when we actually met the staffers instead of, especially at the Senate level, it was the staffers over the senators. The staffers actually know what's going on. The staffers know what bills are being talked about in the background that haven't even been written yet. They know what's coming. They know what the zeitgeist is for this year, for where you are. So those are the people you really want to talk to. Developing those relationships is great. So the club is there. We will help you. When COVID is over, there are definitely goals to send a group to DC, especially now that kind of the one alternate lobbying group that we've been with is not going to be an option for us anymore. There's going to be a push to have a diverse group go. If you don't want to be the person that has a meeting, that's totally fine. If you want to help out, but you're like, I don't want to have to go talk. I like sitting at home. I'm the stay-at-home person, which is completely fine. If you want to get data to me, that is incredibly helpful. I do not have, I right now I have 3 jobs basically. I have this. I'm homeschooling my kid, and I have a full-time law practice. I just frankly don't have time. I know I'm missing stuff in some states that just aren't on my radar. Let me know there's something coming, and we'll get somebody addressing it, even if it's not you. That's incredibly, incredibly valuable to the club to keep us up to date on that. And we'll be working on that. And then, when this kind of, because it's not going to be forever, it's going to be a while, but it's not going to be forever. When this changes, to have taken the time and built the relationships, it'll be really valuable at that point to have all of that. One of the questions I'm reading, are there samples?
I think Kyle has gone ahead and collated them for you. So
Great.
I have a whole list of questions for you.
Okay, Kyle, why don't we go ahead and start with those?
Sure. Actually, I think it was Jason that went with this question, and I'm curious because I experienced this myself. What are the suggestions for avoiding burnout when you get so tired of the Sisyphean efforts that you put forward, and it's just that rock keeps rolling down the hill again?
Richard, you dealt with that, I think. I remember talking to you, and you were just like, "I'm done."
Yeah. It requires effort, and burnout is an issue. It's or it can be, and I think the main thing is to let your friends support you, but also just take a break, man. Just if you can, and like I was lucky. By the time it was done, it was the seas were calm for a while, and they still are. For a while, it looked like they were going to go through. We have an initiative system here, just like California does, and they were going to try. The failed bills were going to be tried to reintroduced as initiatives directly to the voters, and fortunately, those didn't make it either. So for various reasons, I won't get into. But just take advantage of any downtime and just do something else.
Yeah.
We have something that's already built in. Go to the range with some LGC members, go out to dinner afterwards, have a beer, talk, tell some jokes, life goes on. We've got that built in.
Yeah.
So I have an experienced life very similar to Lara's, except I run a company, and I am also an emergency manager by profession and training. And so COVID has been quite the thing professionally. And this is very much a passion of mine, but gun rights and rights as a whole. Let me be very clear. I'm a pro-rights person. The Second Amendment just happens to be a part of that for me. It's exhausting. And the trick is to have lots of other people who pick up and continue to carry when you cannot. And so it's just like you send in one wave and they take some damage for a while because that's what it feels like. And then more have to come behind. And you've got to be willing to let others move it forward when you can't, and be stepped back up forward when you've rested and they need a break.
Yeah. I actually think we might do a whole panel in our remote learning about avoiding burnout. Sarah in Guns Guide to Liberals has a whole great thing on it. I will tell you that I have a group of women. Deb is part of it, but I have some other women too. Deb and I talk privately a lot about, oh my God. And that's really important. It's really important to have your group that you can go to and say, oh my God, you cannot believe what such and such did today. And know that have them talk you down or say, I've got to hand it to you. I can't do this anymore. And then you can come back and do it. I think most of you guys know the story about when I went to SHOT in 2017, and they live streamed the inauguration. And I didn't touch a gun or do anything with the club for 5.5 months.
Yeah.
Couldn't be part of it. Couldn't be part of the world, was done. And I just had to hand everything off. And that was pretty extreme, but you need that. Okay, Kyle, next question.
I'd like to comment on that you're, just done part. I've been there. It sucks. I think I might re-engage on Daily Coast. If I can get Ed and Dave and a few other people that were there with me, maybe build a consensus there.
Yeah.
My account still exists.
So does mine. Ed, what about you? Oh, he's muted.
I'm muted, but yeah. So I was here to help pick up the pieces when Lara decided it was time to be done for a little while. So.
Gotcha. Next question was someone had mentioned that they being the politician were really happy when they realized that you are not the NRA. Other than dress and demeanor, what are the contrasts that make that a good thing in their eyes, in your opinion, or if they've actually told you?
That we have something in common with them that's not guns.
Mm-hmm.
The other groups, and frankly, this is both sides. The other groups have one issue that they will talk on, and it is both of them are extremely emotional on it, and they don't talk facts, and they don't talk about anything else, and they don't relate guns to the real world and to the other issues that they're facing. That's what we do different.
Right.
And I would also say we talk their language. I would always be sure to include something about guns and being able to carry a gun being important to vulnerable communities who are at risk to hate crimes. I would always bring that up. And, talking to a liberal Democrat, ding, 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 even if they don't agree with us on guns, they get that. So
I think part also is coming in without I hate everything type of attitude. And it's like, okay, here is where this, okay, we see what you're trying to do. Here's a better way of going about it. Tell them where to, I'm paraphrasing what one of the representatives or one of their staff said. Don't tell us no, tell us where we can say yes to, what we can say. That helps a great deal.
To build on that, what I found works is it's a lot of the very little subtle things, because every community has their own way, culture, folk ways, traditions, and it's how we speak. It's little turns of phrase. It's stuff that is really hard to pick up, but if you hear someone who's a conservative, they're going to have a certain set of linguistic tics and norms and drivers of the conversation. If someone is liberal, it's going to be a little bit different. If someone is, say, a Marxist, the language is going to be different because of mental models.
But find the common ground. Because there is far more common ground than many people are willing to realize. And that's, I think, what makes us very different is we are looking for common ground, because in the end, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, you still want violent deaths as reduced as much as humanly possible. And I will say that David is masterful at bringing diverse groups together and keeping us focused and organized.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that everybody has a common goal is something that gets lost a lot. And I talk about this when I talk to conservatives. I do a lot of talking with conservatives about, liberals actually like guns. We're not the only ones. But I talk about the antis, and I talk about the fact that you need to listen to what they mean and not what they say, because what they really want are their kids to come home safe at the end of the day. And that's what the conservatives want too. And so when I'm lobbying, I end up kind of flipping that a lot, but that's something that, be aware of kind of what the point is at the end, what we all want. It's just, we don't agree how to get there. Okay. What's the next question?
Someone had mentioned being a technical resource for the politician instead of the NRA or the antis. What other ways can you be a resource to the rep or the senator, and what other resources can we offer to those people?
For me, so the Dianne Feinstein story that a lot of people have already heard is that we went and we met with her aide, who's no longer there now, but at the time, and she said, can I call you? Can I have your card? Can I call you if I have a technical question? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And she's really how I came to this position, by the way. And she said, yeah, I can't call the NRA. They hang up on me. As soon as they hear who I am, they know who I am and they hang up. And I said, well, what do you need? And she said, well, I don't know what a bullet button is. And I said, oh, let me explain this to you. We're having a range day in a couple of days. I know you might not want to shoot, but why don't you come early and we can show you the mechanics of a rifle, like safely. We won't have it loaded. You're going to be on a range, but we'll make it safe. And she did it. Stuff like that. You can actually you don't have to invite the member, but you can invite the staff to the range. I've done that and it's been incredibly helpful. There is a guy who's a FUD, who's a long-time rep up in Northern Cal. He and I have talked about going shotgun shooting for a couple of years at this point. We just haven't been able to, I haven't been there when he's been there. But, he shoots shotguns. We still are talking about going out and doing a sporting clays day. And I got to tell you, it's going to be a lot easier to talk to him about an assault weapons ban when we're sitting there shooting clays than it is that kind of thing. Be a technical resource. They don't know what the difference between a striker fired and a double action single action is. They don't know, but some of them don't know what the difference between a semi-automatic and a revolver is. I mean, they know what they look like, that they're different, but they don't know the mechanics to it. They don't know the difference between a shotgun and a bolt action and a semi-automatic rifle.
Most people don't understand that a military grade weapon doesn't refer to the power of it. It refers to the reliability of it.
Right.
And that's, if you can help them understand the safety aspects there, just the terminology. It's a magazine, not a clip. And the words that they use that immediately turn the conversation off from those who often most need to hear the words in the message.
Yeah, hugely helpful. Also, real data. The FBI data, the CDC study that got buried,
Right.
the Lancet articles, British Medical Journal has a good article. We have tons of this is on the blog in various places. And again, leadership and all of us can help you find it. That real data on what is really going on and why, when we say assault weapons bans aren't going to matter, it's not that we want to keep our guns, it's that it's 450 versus 35,000.
Right.
It's statistically not even important, it's statistically irrelevant. What we really want to focus on, it's not going to do anything because it's not going to move the needle.
Right.
Here's why, here's the data. That kind of thing is incredibly important.
I have a document that we put together when we started the lobbying process, and I need to credit Jeff with at least half of it, where we've dug up all sorts of articles and resources. And I have continued to add to that. I have articles from Mother Jones, Guardian. I don't know about NPR, but the sources that I can give someone on the left and it's in their comfort zone.
Jeff absolutely was our detail and data savant. He could pull the facts out of his back pocket without a second thought. And we need more of those.
We have someone here in California who does that for us as well, who's brilliant at it. And but if that's your kind of thing, let us know. We will definitely put that skill to use.
If we can get a document that contains all of these links and other documents and kind of a guidebook, and I'm willing to share what we have. It's not an official LGC thing. That would jumpstart your process just by the process of reading these and watching the videos. That will make things a lot easier and it will be a smaller mountain decline because you won't be looking for as much stuff. You'll be ingesting it.
We can do that. Kyle,
That,
next.
that actually leads perfectly into the next question. I rearranged a few things. Do we have a single space right now on the LGC website or someplace else where people can go to find, data or those questions or any of the email templates that you were talking about or anything along those lines, where we can just go, hey, you want to lobby your person? Click this link, and here's everything on the same page.
We are working on it. We kind of had something and it needs to be updated, and with some migrations it's disappeared, but it will I would say it will be there within the next couple of weeks.
Eric just realized you needed to do it.
Yeah. Well, remember we had kind of a source, and I think it's disappeared off into one of the Google drives somewhere.
10-minute warning on the time.
Something
Okay.
that I recommend, if you're going to be doing this with a group and it's going to be more than 2 or 3 people, there are some 3 organizational tools that may be useful. Reach out to me afterwards. We can talk.
Yeah. Kyle, is there another question? I think there are a couple more.
There are a few more. Has anyone here ever met a legislator about a different subject where you support his or her stance on that and then use it to segue into gun rights and being pro-gun or root mitigation or anything along those lines?
I've gone to town halls where I've thanked them for what they were talking about on a different issue, and then said, just to introduce myself, I'm the national spokesperson for the LGC. I'd love to talk to you about this later. I haven't gone to their office to talk about a different issue and segued in.
Something that I have to urge is that when you're wearing the LGC hat and talking to the legislator, make sure you stick to things that are firearms or firearms related, because I don't want to play culture war. And that's something we've done in Virginia, and it's helped. Like I will say personally, I am X, but as an organization, we really concentrate on X, Y, and Z issues.
Actually, I had a slightly different experience than that. We went to talk about the gun legislation on the table with my local representative, and the local representative had a need for some data from the business community, specifically women-owned small business community, and I happened to be a part of that. And so she had asked for us, or for me specifically, to write a letter on a topic to them that they could use to help support the legislation. Completely on-gun related, very much something from a constituent perspective is very important to me. And so I went back to the hotel room that night and wrote the letter. So when they have an ask of you that's relevant to something else they support, and you support it as well, help them. So I don't typically, the other thing is the Hatch Act governs David and I, and particularly governs me. So I cannot fully lobby. I do have the right to stand up for things and to speak on things that I am personally impacted by. And so, that's something that happens a lot in the Washington, D.C. area and the federal contractor community.
Okay.
So-
Next question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So the answer to the question is, if I'm speaking to them, I don't segue into something else unless they've driven it.
Okay, so the next question was dealing with emotional appeal. And when you're dealing with reps or senators who are significantly disconnected with their constituents' experiences, hold on one second. Apparently my copy paste got really messed up here. Here we go. How do you approach emotional appeal when representatives are often significantly disconnected with their constituents' experiences, especially in the area of firearms?
Yeah, Brian.
That could be that calm center. I mean, yes, there's going to be emotion. In fact, the story I have to tell is one of the staff members that we met with, I forget who, she was a staff member before. She's a former judge. She had a personal connection to the Virginia Tech shooting. So that really freaked her out. And she had a very anti-gun attitude to the point where she insisted that the shooter was used an assault rifle, which we all know wasn't the case. So it's literally a matter of being the calm to her storm. So just, okay, let's sit down, let's take some deep breaths. I'm not going to patronize you or your experience. I understand how traumatic that was for you. Let's talk this through. And it's just like when you're dealing with anyone who is just really, you have to take the call that they can latch on to.
One of the things that Brian just brought up, try to get that intel about who people are. People who are what I call true believers, the people who have a really emotional attachment to this instead of just a party attachment to this, are a very different kind of conversation and kind of person to talk to than just talking to them on a legislative issue.
Right.
To the point that, again, I didn't call Dianne Feinstein because of this. There are certain people that it's not going to be worth talking to. And because they're so emotionally attached, and that's not our job. And I'm not the person to take that on. Some people are. Also, Guns Guides to Liberals, again, has a great session on this. Cannot emphasize enough what great work Sarah has done with that. I think that's a good way to look at it. But definitely try to get the intel on who people are and who are the, going into somebody who has, Brian, it sounds like you did a really great job with that. But just be ready. It's going to be a very different conversation. My thing about people who have that really strong emotional attachment, you probably want to talk to them. If that's somebody who you really need to talk to, you're really going to need to do the work on having a very particular ask for them, a very narrow, very particular ask that is not so emotionally charged.
Right.
Really, that's going to take homework. And that's something that if there's a particular issue like that comes up, definitely talk to us. I would definitely say talk to the five of us who have dealt with all of that. I think, and we can find some resources on that. There's techniques you use there that you don't use for other things.
As you do more talking with legislators, as you do more talking with their staffs, it will get easier. And having those really difficult conversations will get easier. There is a representative who represents Alexandria, Senator Eben, and he really is into gun control. But we did not have a chance to talk with him. I'm kind of glad of it, because we're going to be next time around in a much better place to have that conversation, because we've had a lot more of those.
Mm-hmm.
And we will know who to put in the room. One of the keys that I found is that if I am meeting with a representative and let's just say they are African American, I'm going to make sure that Brian is in the room, because they're going to have similar life experiences, and the stories Brian is going to tell are going to be much more helpful than anything I can say.
No one likes to be lectured by a middle-aged white guy.
Yeah.
I think on that note, though, we're gonna have to wrap this up.